with Jesse Simonton and Caleb Calhoun with Off the Hook Sports on Tuesday at SEC Media Days. First time in Nashville. Jesse, how's it been in Nashville this week?
Been busy, but going well.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about Tennessee football, which is obviously where you cut your teeth for a long time. And what do you feel like I know they don't go on until Thursday. First of all, what do you think of the fact that they go on the same day as Lane Kiffin? That had to be by design.
Yeah, I mean, I don't pay attention to a lot of, when I'm thinking about the schedule stuff. I guess it is kind of funny. I mean, last year, that Lane's connection with Tennessee will never not, be at least amusing to Vol fans in particular. The golf ball stuff obviously was, a recent thing that was pretty good. I think Lane and the Auburn connection probably takes a little more precedent these days, but.
Yeah, that's true. With the whole turning down the Auburn job. So with Tennessee this year, I think the biggest question for a lot of us is, can they actually compete with Georgia? Because everybody says they're the one team in the East and challenge them, and they host them at Neyland. But I got to be honest, last year's game, it said 27-13 on the scoreboard, but in reality, it could have been 45-0 if Georgia really wanted it to be that. So do you think Tennessee actually has a shot to be on their level somewhat this year, or at least be in the same playing field?
Last year I was someone that certainly believed in a Tennessee resurgence. I had them as the number 2 team when a lot of folks were talking up Kentucky or what could happen in year one with Billy Napier in Florida. It did surprise me that they were that good, that they were a college football playoff fringe contender. Obviously, they spoiled their chances by kind of stubbing their toe against South Carolina there. That game against Georgia, though, was not close. And I think, when you kind of look back at the data, Kirby Smart has kind of been one of the few coaches, defensive coaches, that has really kind of figured out how to slow down that Josh Heupel, type offense. And you got to have the dudes on the perimeter that can basically guard guys one-on-one, because then you can, play 6 guys in the box. And so I'm not sure that Tennessee this fall is, with some of the offensive line questions, you lose your best, tackle in Darnell Wright. You lose a guy like Jerome Carvin. I think that Tennessee is still going to be the second best team in the East. I don't see them, but that's not to say they couldn't pull off an upset, but I would be surprised if they really did kind of push Georgia, especially with what we saw happen in Athens a year ago.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, because the whole point of Josh Heupel's offense is he takes away your ability to disguise what you're doing. Well, Georgia doesn't have to disguise what they're doing. They'll line up defensively and just shut you down.
No, I mean, that when you have the luxury of Kamari Lassiter and you put a Nealon Green, or, they have several other, former 5-stars that are out there competing for that second boundary quarterback spot. But what also makes them so difficult to go up against defensively is the fact that they can play small in the box, because, they have guys that are able to both eat space and create kind of, lanes for linebackers to just flood in. And we saw what happened last year. Tennessee gave up a boatload of tackles for loss and sacks in that game.
Yeah, and then, of course, Tennessee also decided to trigger the Georgia crowd ahead of the game, which may not have been the smartest thing to
do. I mean, the false start certainly played a huge impact. And that's why Tennessee, you can't shortchange the fact that an upset is certainly not it's not something that can't happen. I mean, the game's going to be in Neyland. Obviously, home field advantage is going to be a huge, chip for Tennessee. To say, hey, you got to see your place. Now come knock us off here. It's going to be a fun November game. I'm glad that game's later in the schedule. The last 2 seasons. Last year that was the first year it had been kind of later in the calendar. It's going to be that way again this fall. Tennessee takes care of business, early in the season. That could be another, top 10, top 5 showdown.
Yeah, Tony Barnhart and I were speaking, and I don't think there's ever been a game in the regular season when the SEC with 2 teams undefeated that late, November the 18th, which would be very intriguing. It also, if somebody could actually ball out against Georgia, it could help Tennessee. It could help Joe Milton's Heisman chances maybe, because it's so late in the year. Tennessee playing Vanderbilt, Kentucky hasn't had a lot of chances at big moments in November in history.
Certainly so. I will say this. We're talking a lot of Tennessee, Georgia. Tennessee needs to end that losing streak in Gainesville first. Tennessee's got to go to Florida and do something they haven't done in, I think, about 2 decades, and that's beat the Gators in the swamp. This is a Florida team, that's kind of licking their wounds right now, coming off a tough, year one under Billy Napier. I do think the Gators are going to be a little bit better than some expect. I think they really like some of the transfer portal additions they brought in, specifically on the defensive line. Cameron Jackson from Memphis, in particular, I think is a guy that's going to make a big impact for Florida this fall. But they have questions at quarterback. Is Graham Mertz actually that guy? Considering what Josh Heupel has done with this Tennessee program in short order, if the program is truly kind of climbing that ladder, whether they make the college football playoff or not, whether they beat Georgia or not this year, a demarcation of success is that we are the better team against Florida. Let's go win that game in Gainesville. Big September showdown.
Yeah, and 2 road games for Tennessee this year against teams picking up transfer portal quarterbacks that would be traditionally to Tennessee fans' biggest rivalries, Florida and Alabama. Not so much anymore in recent years, although last year they beat both. But who is more desperate in terms of their quarterback addition through the portal? Who seems more desperate, Florida with Graham Mertz or Alabama getting Sam Hartman?
Not Sam Hartman. They got
Sorry.
Tyler Buckner.
Tyler Buckner. Sam Hartman was that.
They would have really liked to get Sam Hartman.
Yeah.
And I think Sam Hartman would have been a hell of an addition for Alabama. And it is, I mean, in terms of desperation, the fact that Sam Hartman's former offensive coordinator, the guy who recruited him to Notre Dame, the guy who worked tirelessly to get Sam Hartman to leave Wake Forest, never ended up coaching him really. Tommy Rees spent the spring with, Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson in Alabama and said, hey, I need to go get the guy that I literally found someone to replace at Notre Dame in Tyler Buckner. And yet I still think Florida, I don't know if it's desperation. I just think that the Gators don't have the options. At least the Tide can say Jalen Milroe, former blue chip recruit, has elite traits, big arm, might be one of the fastest players, on the Crimson Tide's roster. Ty Simpson, former 5-star, Buckner, highly recruited. There's at least options there. Right now, there's nothing really behind Graham Mertz. And so I think you saw Florida try to kick the tires on maybe, another transfer portal quarterback or two. They didn't really have one that they liked. And so they brought in, there's a freshman kind of waiting. There's a former walk-on, a guy who plays baseball too. So I think it's going to be Graham Mertz's show.
Yeah, and Ty Simpson, I know he's a redshirt freshman, but he was still a freshman technically, so it was just spring, so he could turn it around when August hits too and be what they thought he would be.
Yeah, and I think the bigger question for Tennessee is just, or for Alabama, is probably, the first couple of weeks into fall camp, identifying which 2 options give you the best chance, and then really giving the lion's share of reps to those guys, because you can't split reps between 3 quarterbacks, for several weeks of training camp and have your team ready, especially when, Alabama has week 2 against Texas.
Yeah, and I think Tennessee's learned that in the past with different quarterbacks that they've let split reps a little too long. It's pretty clear at Tennessee that Joe Milton is the starter going into the year right now, and Nico Iamaleava is second. But do you think there's any chance at all Nico steals the job?
Yeah. I mean, I you can't rule it out, and that's because we've seen Joe Milton lose the job before. If history is the best indicator,
you would say he got hurt and that he didn't lose it, but
well, he got hurt. He got no. I mean, he got he got Wally pipped, but he also it was not just the injury, I think, that held him back from getting back on the field. Now, to his credit, he did not run and hide from his limitations. This is a guy who has worked tirelessly to improve his footwork, to improve his accuracy. We've seen that you can. Josh Allen, some other guys in the NFL have proven you can actually learn how to become a more accurate quarterback. And so if he looks a lot like the guy that performed against Clemson, he's not going to lose his job. He's going to be Tennessee's starting quarterback, and he might be a first-round draft pick, come season's end. If he plays like he did, kind of sporadically a couple of years ago, turns the ball over, airmails too many throws. Nico's is as polished and as talented as kind of any true freshman quarterback that's come around in several seasons. And so I think he's clearly the heir apparent for the Vols. Does that heir apparency start, in 2023, or is it a 2024 deal when, he and Arch Manning and some of these other guys are kind of all competing against each other, as second-year players?
Right. And before we get out here, speaking of quarterbacks too, thinking of the West, because LSU may have the best quarterback in the SEC this year in Jay Daniels. And, we keep talking like LSU wins. Like everybody's asking about Kirby Smart and if Georgia's playing at Alabama. But Alabama, you covered recruiting for a while, so, just dominated on the recruiting trail this past year. But is LSU a threat to supplant Alabama in the near future with Brian Kelly?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know about supplant for like for eternity, but in terms of 2023, I mean, I'm picking. I'm one of the dummies picking the Tigers to beat the not only I don't know if I think they're going to beat the Tide, but I'm picking the Tigers to win the SEC West.
You and I are on the same page on that.
And so and for me, I distill it down to the fact that I think they just have fewer uncertainties. I really like Alabama, the recruiting rankings you're talking about. I really like Alabama's wide receiver upside. I think the offensive line is going to be better. Those are two units right away where LSU, I know they're going to be good. Malik Neighbors is the best receiver in the SEC. If it's not him, it's Antoine Wells. Kalen Lacey's good. Thomas is good. Offensive line, they got Campbell and Embry Jones, maybe two potential All-Americans. So when I'm projecting things on Alabama, I have more known quantities with the Tigers. And so when I have that, coupled with the fact that you brought up Jaden Daniels, I also know who's going to be the starting quarterback. Oh, and if he goes down, I like Garrett Nussmeier more than I like the three guys at Alabama. I'm taking the Tigers.
And to all of our viewers who called me LSU homer, you just heard from somebody else. We're both calling for LSU to win the West this year. So it's not me being crazy. Jesse, thanks a lot. We really appreciate you doing this.
Absolutely, man.
This has been no problem. This has been Jesse Simonton of On3 for Off the Hook Sports. This is Kayla Calhoun.